The Webster's Dictionary definition of yellow fever is an acute infectious disease that is endemic in sub-Saharan Africa and tropical South America. It is marked by symptoms such as fever, muscle pain, and headache, of sudden onset with typical resolve within a few days, but are sometimes followed by more serious symptoms such as jaundice, high fever, and hemorrhage, and is caused by flavirus, species yellow fever virus of the genus Flavivirus, transmitted especially by yellow fever mosquitoes. From the CDC, they say the most effective way to prevent the infection from yellow fever virus is to prevent mosquito bites. Mosquito bites during the day and night. Use insect repellent, wear long-sleeve shirts and pants, treat clothing and gear, and get vaccinated before traveling, if vaccination is recommended for you. But Urban Dictionary defines yellow fever as a term usually applied to white males who have a clear sexual preference for women of Asian descent, although it can also be used in reference to white females who prefer Asian men. Unfortunately, this isn't a scientific medical video about the disease yellow fever. It's a social deep dive and understanding of a very old Western fetish towards Asian people, mostly women, and why is it so problematic? And boy howdy, is this problematic. I guess we need to talk about when do we think we ended up to the point that yellow fever came to be the term used as a way of expressing fetishization against Asian people. Before we go into this, I guess we need to talk about the difference between the preferences and fetishization. Catherine Zhang Cho, founder of Asian American magazine Slanted, says it best. It's totally okay to have a type when it comes to dating or sex, but I think you need to be wary of when that type veers off into exclusively entering relationships with people of a certain race. When you project the same kind of personality, behavior, and values across an entire ethnic group and don't see the nuanced human being, that's a racial fetish. So this idea of this submissive, beautiful Asian woman has been with us since the 1800s, when the first European man landed on the first Japanese port city and laid eyes on what he would call the geisha girl. One of the first books written about fetishizing Asian people was published in 1887 with a book known as Madame Chrysanthemum and written by French writer Pierre Loti. It tells the story of a French sailor who rents a house and a wife? Oh boy, that's not good. While he is in Japan. The story is told through journal entries of the French sailor and his experiences with his rent-a-wife Kiku, which is Japanese for chrysanthemum. Really hitting it on the head there, sir. And how he interacts with her during wife duties. Sex. I am talking about sex. And although Kiku has a name, she's not really a person and is treated more like an object. Oh boy, that's not good. This would then spark all other people to decide to write their own kind of fan fictions, making plays and operas about Madame Chrysanthemum. But one important short story that came out was written by American John Long in 1998 called Madame Butterfly. This time, instead of a French sailor, it's an American guy who goes to Japan and falls in love with a beautiful Japanese woman known as Cho-Cho, which is Japanese for butterfly. Ooh, I see what you did there, Mr. Long, you linguistic genius. And Cho-Cho has more depth. She actually falls in love with the officer. So when the officer leaves, Cho-Cho tries to commit suicide and fails and is left alone, bearing the weight of raising her child alone without her husband. Oh boy, that's not good. But hold on guys, don't worry. They rewrote it in a play where Cho-Cho actually kills herself and her son is then raised in America with his father and his new American, probably white wife? Oh god, editing Kian, just play the sound effect for me. Oh boy, that's not good. Okay, so like fun fact, my large group speech actually did a replay of Madame Butterfly for a short play, and I remember my friend's girlfriend was in it and she was white, and I went there watching it and in my head I'm like, this seems a little racist. I have said this before, but in the mid-1800s there was a boom in Asian immigrants specifically from China that led to the concepts and ideas of the yellow peril. I just can't escape this thing, can I? So, Most men didn't bring their wives in fear of racial violence, and the only women that went were from poor Asian families who were either tricked or kidnapped and ended up becoming prostitutes in America.
Oh boy, that's not good.
Robin Zhang, an assistant professor of philosophy at Yale NUS College in Singapore, said this in the Huffington Post article. This in turn generated the perception of Asian women as morally degenerate but also sexually alluring, which was used to justify the passing of legislative barriers that made the immigration of Asian women nearly impossible and only served to further exuberate the low numbers of Asian women. But this wasn't the end of it. This concept of sexualization of Asian women still rang true. When American soldiers were stationed in Asia, and they would visit sex workers, which is portrayed a lot in the media portraying Vietnam. These concepts and ideas created a racial stereotype for Asian women. It goes by many names like geisha girl, China doll, but today I'm going to refer to it as the Lotus Blossom. The Lotus Blossom stereotype is a notion that all Asian women are sexually submissive, quiet, feminine, and often implied to be dumb. Women under this stereotype usually act ways towards white men, because this stereotype was made by and for white men to feed in the Western thought, the Asian people are weak and we, the white people, will save them. So now let's talk about what makes the Lotus Blossom stereotype portrayed in media so problematic. So the first thing, when this stereotype started being portrayed in things like operas and plays and early films, which adapted the stories of Madame Butterfly and Chrysanthemum, who brought to life the exotic, mysterious, and submissive Asian women, they were all portrayed by white women in yellowface.
Oh boy, that's not good.
With the first silent film in 1915, the main character being portrayed by actress Mary Pickford, and the Paramount production in 1932 starring Sylvia Sidney. But I do have to say there was a silent film based on this concept known as The Toil of the Sea, starring Chinese actress Anna May Wong in a leading role. But there's an argument to be made to me like, not Keith, these are from the 1800s. You can't use media like this because that's way old, it's over a century old. Where's the more modern conversation? And for that, we need to talk about the 1989 Broadway musical, Miss Saigon. So this is a quote-unquote retooled retelling of stories like Madame Butterfly, but instead it tells the story of a love in the Vietnam War between a soldier and a 17-year-old Vietnamese prostitute.
Oh boy, that's not good.
This plot is played off as romantic and loving, but then he leaves her with a child and he gets remarried and comes back after a good amount of years with his wife, and again Miss Saigon dies in his arms by killing herself and then leaving her son again to be raised by these white people.
Oh boy, that's not good.
The article, The Fetishization of Asian Culture in the West by Samantha Ann McDonough explains why this continuously retelling of this story and the tropes behind it aren't good. Miss Saigon is a beautiful musical. The songs are heart-wrenching and the way it's blocked is amazing. And that's the issue with it. Miss Saigon romanticizes the idea of being forced into prostitution, the red light district, and even suicide at the end. Showing these parts of history is fine, but the way it was turned into a white savior story and trauma porn by romanticizing the suicide of an Asian woman because she couldn't marry a white man is what gives Miss Saigon these issues. Romanticizing the struggle of Asian, particularly women, people, and having these struggles end either by death or just being solved by a white person, usually a man, is such a harmful trope and the key part of the Lotus Blossom stereotype, but no one points out issues with it because it's so old. The trope has its roots deep in racism, yet it's such a central part of Western media's portrayal of Asians that everyone thinks it's normal. It's not, and it shouldn't be considered normal anymore. And this is the part where we're going to ask, but these were all written in the past, Kian. Haven't we really changed our concept and views of Asian women? Do these really create the concept we have of how we view Asian women in America now? Okay, well, editing Kian, please play the snippets for me.
There's just something, the way the body is shaped, the way, again, the color of the skin. Without going into too many, details, it's so different.
When I see an Asian woman, it's just like, wow, she's beautiful. And it's like, I just kind of feel like, it sounds silly, but like an angel was dropped, in front of me, and it's just like, wow.
So I'm looking for a petite, gracious woman, which traditionally happens to be an Asian woman.
I think that there's a lot of history and there's a lot of beauty behind the culture itself. And there's also an exotic look and feel to an Asian woman compared to a white woman or what I'm used to.
From my experience, Asian girls have been better lovers. It's just something cool to me, just something that I really want to settle down. I hate using that term. Or get married to a Asian woman.
Look at a group of women, I will always notice the Asian women first. It happens every time. For me, it would probably be Asian. It would be Asian.
Probably would be an Asian person, Asian woman.
I'm looking for a mate. I'm looking at Asian women to be that mate.
Okay, so the first obvious thing is, and now I'm talking only about the Asian women that were born and raised in Asian countries and not in Western countries. So the Western countries born and raised Asian women, though that doesn't apply to them, is that they are not affected or spoiled by influences like feminism.
Oh boy, that's not good.
See, so you can't tell me that's not a little weird, that these guys are fetishizing these women by saying they're soft, they're exotic, they're submissive and just kind lovers. And for that last guy to say he doesn't like Western Asian women, he likes the legit Eastern Asian women because they're not tainted by feminism, he's basically just low-key saying that he doesn't like women who speak their mind and have opinions. That's not good. This stuff is very telling because before I decided I was gonna make this video, I had to think to myself for a hot minute if I should make this video. Sure, I'm Asian, but I'm also a male, and I have never experienced these kind of things my female Asian counterparts have. So I texted my sister, my cousin, a couple of my Asian women friends, and I asked them all the same question. Have they ever felt like they were being fetishized just for being Asian? And they all said yes. They were all told the same weird, cringy Asian sex jokes, some of them before they even knew what sex was. They've been asked questions about their anatomy down there, whether or not their vagina was really, really tight as other people said, or if it was sideways like their eyes. And they've also had people just straight up tell them that they have yellow fever and they're really into Asian women. But I realized I can't be on my high horse about that either, because when I was younger, and even in college, I used to make jokes that I only date white girls. But then I also have to come to realize the fact that I'm from a small town in northwest Iowa where it is predominantly Caucasians, so take that as you will. What these conversations with these people made me realize is that I've spent my entire life complaining that people were making fun of me because I was Asian, because of my accent and my culture, giving me the long duck dongs, the datas, and the shitty Family Guy jokes, when my female counterparts had to deal with all that and the oh me so hornies and the Miss Saigon symptoms. While people were making fun of me for my skin color, they were lusting over these women because of their skin color and where they're from, heritage-wise, as well as this weird fake idea of Asian girl innocence because they were shown to be submissive and kind lovers. People were attracted to them because of their race and where they're from, and not because of the person they are. I put this already in the beginning of the video, but I'm going to tell you again. We are now hitting some very triggering territories where I'm going to have to talk about domestic violence, sexual assault, and rape. And if those things trigger you, I urge you kindly to turn off the video. The demure, subservient, and delicate Lotus Blossom stereotype is intended to cast Asian women as less than, both in terms of race and gender. There was always a conversation that stereotypes exist because there's a bit of truth to them. But for this stereotype, it's a dangerous truth, because 21 to 55% of Asian women in the US report experiencing intimate physical and/or sexual violence during their lifetime, based on a compilation of desegregated samples of Asian ethnicities in local communities. 18% of Asian or Pacific Islander women reported experiencing rape, physical violence, and/or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime in a national survey. API women, 23% experienced some sort of contact sexual violence, 10% experienced completed or attempted rape, and 21% had non-contact unwanted sexual experiences during their lifetime. Of 607 Asian respondents, the top explanation for why family violence happens were that husbands want power, domination, and control. 72 responded this way, and that he is frustrated/has anger. 67 responded this way. 22% of Cambodians, 18% of Chinese, 29% of Korean, and 5% of Southeast Asian, and 9% Vietnamese men and women said that women who is being abused should not tell anyone about the abuse. When you look at the statistics, stereotypes like this can be dangerous to have about Asian women. These accumulated everything, not just violence towards women for being Asian, but these stereotypes can lead to sexual acts of violence. There is no denying that media of this minority population has had an effect on building preconceived notions and shaping stereotypes of Asian women as passive, exotic, and more easily dominated. Images of the Japanese geisha girl, the Southeast Asian seductress, and the China doll pervade American culture and add to the misconception of Asian women. This has had disturbing results. For instance, in 2002, Jennifer Lynn Gossett and Sarah Byrne conducted a content analysis study of 31 pornographic websites that advertised scenes depicting the rape or torture of women, and found that nearly half of these sites used depictions of Asian women as the rape victim. Let's talk about the events that happened on November 2000 in Spokane, Washington. On the morning of November 11th, 3 students were waiting at a bus stop near campus when a woman drove up and offered them a ride downtown. The students told police they gratefully accepted, but the students were then taken down to a remote road and handcuffed, they told the police. One woman moved to a second car, apparently talked her kidnapper into releasing her at a downtown bus station. But the 2 others were taken to a house in the Spokane Valley, about 10 miles east of the city, and raped, police say. The women were later pushed out of the car near their campus. These 2 victims were Japanese foreign exchange students. The reason why these 3 kidnappers chose them, because he believed they would be submissive and would not go to the police for fear of dishonoring their families, threatening these girls if they said anything about this, they would send these videos to their fathers. In 2002, North Carolina State University, student Lily Wang was stalked and murdered by a man, a white classmate who was infatuated with her and admitted to the colleagues that he had in fact had an Asian fetish. And in 2005 in New Jersey, Princeton graduate student admitted to police that he had been silently terrorizing more than 50 Asian women on campus by clipping snippets of their hair, spraying them with his urine, and pouring his semen or urine in their drinks at the university dining halls when they weren't looking. After 3 years of these repulsive acts, investigators finally caught up with and arrested him. They searched his campus apartment and found stolen underwear and women's hair stuffed in mittens that he had been using for sexual self-gratification. This is going to be a little off script, so I'm really sorry. But this kind of stuff leads us to what happened in Atlanta, Georgia on March 16th, when some asshole decided to shoot up 3 Asian-owned spas because he couldn't control his sexual urges and had to get rid of them. This asshole killed 6 people, 4 of them Asian women, because he couldn't control his sexual pleasures. He was an asshole, and I'm not going to say his name, I'm not going to show his fucking face, but and you can say it's because he was a sexual deviant, but there is also a racial component in it, because there are a lot, I googled it, there are a lot of strip clubs in Atlanta, Georgia, but he specifically targeted 3 Asian-owned spas. And like I said, he killed 6 innocent people. I'm not gonna say his name, but I'm gonna tell you the names of those 6 people. Hyunjung Grant, 51, loved karaoke, dancing in clubs, and she made the world's best kimchi stew. She was a loving mother. Xiaojie Tan, 49, who owned Asian Spa and one other in Ackworth, Georgia, also went by her American name Emily. She was remembered as a curious, hardworking, and caring woman who always filled with joy. Delaney Ashley Yuan, 33, leaves behind a 13-year-old son and 8-month-old daughter. She and her husband have been married for less than a year. Paul Andrew Michaels, 54, owned an alarm company in Atlanta where he and his wife Bonnie have lived 26 years. His brother Josh said Paul Mitchell's expressed interest in owning his own spa. Young A.U., 63, among the 4 workers killed in Atlanta. She was also a mother. Sung Chung Park, 74, was also a worker at the Atlanta spa. And Soonchik Kim, 69, worked at one of the spas in Atlanta. Sorry guys, I needed a minute. I got a little emotional there. These ideas and concept of the fetishization of Asian women, as you can tell, are very harmful and can be very dangerous. Which means I need to talk about one last thing that we don't ever really talk about with the problem with Asian fetishization. Do you remember that snippet of that guy saying he's only interested in East Asian women that are actually from Asia? Well, we need to talk about sex tourism and sex trafficking in places in Southeast Asia. From the NATO Association of Canada website states this: in 2014, Southeast Asia had the fastest growing tourism industry in the world, with 96.6 million international tourists having visited that year. Part of the lure which continues to attract such a vast amount of visitors is the fact that the sex industry in this region, and especially in Thailand, has been allowed to flourish due to inadequate legal enforcement when it comes to clamping down on human trafficking and sexual exploitation, as well as transnational organized crime as a whole. Prostitution has been officially outlawed in Thailand since 1996 under the Prevention and Suppression of Prostitution Act, but the booming sex industry that thrives there to this day indicates a lack of action at a policy and law enforcement level. What's more, according to the 2013 Transnational Organized Crime Threat Assessment by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, it was estimated that sex trafficking within Thailand and Cambodia alone generated $181 million in revenue that year. Article 3A of the Protocol to Prevent and Suppress and Punish Trafficking in Persons, which defines human trafficking described as exploitation as including at a minimum the exploitation of the prostitution of others for forms of sexual exploitation, forced labors, or services, slavery or practice similar to slavery, servitude, or removal of organs. Exploitation is, however, only one of several facets of human trafficking, as this term also encompasses an array of other practices which fall under the same umbrella. Something worth noting is the use of the word slavery in this passage. Slavery is often regarded as a thing of the past which has long since been abolished. In reality, modern-day slavery is still very much present and can be used synonymously with human trafficking, as they are one and the same. Thailand is one of many active countries in the world when it comes to organized crime because it is a source, transit point, and destination for narcotics and trafficked people in the form of forced labor and sexual exploitation. The victims who are forced into sex work are in most cases those fleeing from conflict areas, poverty, and poor living situations where they may no longer have parents. Women or girls who fall under any of these categories are the most common targets for traffickers to prey on, and they are often carefully manipulated and groomed for a period of time before being exploited. Traffickers then face the task of avoiding detection from border security when it comes to transporting the victims to the final destination. But studies conducted in southern Thailand have shown that it is in fact quite easy to travel without any obstacles or fear of being discovered. In addition to the widespread abuse and violence and cruelty inflicted on the victims, the use of fear is the trafficker's most powerful tool to control, which greatly discourages any kind of solicitation for help. Sure, you can say that some of the sex tourism is just sexual desires that can be released outside of Western eyes, but there is a bit or a lot of Asian fetishization when it comes to sex tourism like this. this is why I think having this conversation about why I think racial stereotypes are dangerous is a good thing. Because for me, this idea of women of Asian descent being submissive and just wanting sex is wrong. It's harmful. And March 16th is proof of it in Atlanta. And so when I wrote my first video essay about Harold and Kumar, and that was the first video essay I ever wrote about breaking down racist stereotypes of Asians in media, the stuff that was happening now was happening in silence. Now it's out in the open. We are now talking about Asian hate crimes against elderly. We are now talking about abuse against Asian women because of fetishization. And I realized that I can't just keep talking about it, and I need to put my money in where my mouth is. So on March 28th and 27th, starting at 6 p.m. Mountain Time on the 27th, and on April 10th and 11th, starting at 6 p.m. Mountain Time on the 10th, I will be doing charity streams for the Asian Mental Health Collective. I think that is a very important charity for Asian people because I know there's a lot of Asian people, especially elderly Asian people, that don't take and talk about mental health. I'll be doing a charity stream. It'll be a variety stream. I'll be playing a lot of different kind of games and just chatting. I hope you can join me. My goal is to raise at least $800 combined both times. And we went through a lot today. We talked about a lot. I am exhausted. I'm exhausted from writing this, and I am exhausted from talking about it. But it had to be said. But I wanted to end with this. Be kind, whether it be to others, because we don't know what they're going through, and be kind to yourself because you deserve that same kind of kindness you give to others. You are loved, you are cared for, you are allowed to feel however you feel, but never let those negative emotions weigh you down. Understand them. And whatever you're going through, cowboy, you got this, okay?